Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Silver Years. My name is DK, and I'm very happy to be here, and I humbly thank you for joining me. Today is a new segment of My Story Time. And for those that don't know, My Story Time is where I tell my story, unscripted and unedited, as a way to counter the ever changing official narrative of history, his story. Because no one, not even AI, can tell my life story as a direct reflection of the times in which I lived better than me. And this is where I'm telling it. Now, the story that wants to be told today is coming in from 1985 and begins in Lakewood, Colorado, where I was working in the mortgage servicing department of a large bank. I had worked for this bank before 1985. In fact, I had left in 1983 and I was gone for maybe a year and a half, 2 years. I had left the state. So I had worked for this bank when it was another bank. And then they moved us to Lakewood. And I had come back. I had stayed connected with everyone while I was out of state. And then when I came back, they welcomed me back because I was one of their I was a very appreciated employee. I was a good employee. And I had worked in the mortgage servicing department for a while. That, um, Anyhow, when I came back, we had a very, very large portfolio of loans that we serviced. And this was during a time when there were all these apartment complexes. We're kind of seeing it now with the brutalism in the 15-minute city prison block apartments that are going up. Well, at the time in Denver, they had something similar going on. And this was in East Denver, almost bordering Aurora, Colorado. But we had all these complexes of apartments that were bought by big investors out of Salt Lake City. And what they did was convert these apartments into condominiums. So they were condo conversions, they called them. So they took them from being something you rent to something you own. So they converted all of these buildings into condominiums that would be sold. So on our books, we had each unit was a different loan on the books for a condominium. And as they would sell them, then we would pay off these loans. So we had volumes, many, many millions of dollars in these units listed one by one. So in the servicing department, I handled the servicing of these loans. Now, this was in the 80s. So computer technology was it was there, okay, but clearly not even close to the extent that we have now. They ran reports every day, DOS reports and printouts and blah blah blah. But the sophistication of the level that we have today was just not even a glimmer at that time. So a lot of stuff was done by hand, that was calculated manually and all that. Payments were processed. Now, I did all that every day. I processed these things every day by hand and I calculated payoffs. I did all of it manually. Never made a mistake, never shorted an account, never had any write offs with my name on it for many years. And it was all hand calculated. Well, the bank decided. Now, the supervisor that I had, who was the head of this mortgage department, her name was Nancy. And of course, I had worked with Nancy for a long time and stayed in touch with her. And then, of course, came back. So Nancy trusted me to handle this particular contract. What they were trying to do was take on servicing for big companies. Now, servicing, and I have mentioned this in some of my previous videos, but servicing is a huge money making thing. And that's where you collect the payments and you take care of the loan after it closes. So um, it was huge money. And servicing portfolios had great value. But in order to get a contract to take on somebody's servicing portfolio, you had to prove that you maintained low delinquency ratios. You collected payments, you were proactive, and you had a low delinquency um, ratio, which was really important. If you had a bunch of loans in default, or people weren't making their payments, and this all impacted your ability to take on new contracts. And during this time, let me say that the bulk of our portfolio, we did have, quite a bit of servicing, but the bulk of it were these condo conversions for these investors out of Salt Lake City. And at this time, they were starting to default. They were making payments on these things, and they were starting to not make payments on these things. So I had a lot of a higher delinquency ratio than what would normally be expected, and there wasn't anything I could do about it. Um, these things were negotiated between upper management and these investors, and I had no part in it. All I kept were the books, basically. So I was asked for this big contract. Nancy hands me this thing and says, I need you to calculate, I need you to answer all of these questions that they want answered based on our numbers and our portfolio and the like. And I need you to figure all this out and give me the numbers so we can submit this application to take on this servicing contract, a big servicing contract. And so, okay, that was what I needed to do. So I dug in and I did the research and I pulled all the numbers and I gave her all the numbers. Well, they submitted them and we were rejected because of the delinquency ratios that I had no control over. And I don't know if I was expected to falsify numbers. Nobody ever said anything. But, once we were rejected, then I got the cold shoulder and I thought, okay, this is situation is breaking down. I could tell that I wasn't long for the count. And I was right. I got called into the back room one day and I was told, you basically messed up and we didn't get the contract because of you. And I tried to defend myself, but it was to no avail. Anyway, I did lose that job. And that job was what led me to the Gog of Magog job, which I talked about. So I'll probably link that in here somewhere, Gog of Magog. And I did it part one, part two, part three of Gog of Magog. But this was the job that preceded and why I ended up looking for a job and ended up working for Gog. But in the meantime, I got let go. I was off a few months before I found a new position with Gog of Magog. But in the interim, it was probably about a 3-month interim. There was a temporary a girl who was temporary. I think her name was Jenny or something. She was a temporary that we would bring her in for big projects on occasion. She didn't want to work there full time, but Jenny was great. And I guess Nancy brought in Jenny to redo all the work that I did, and so that they could get it right. Now that I was out of the way, she brought in Jenny. Well, small world. I ran into Jenny somewhere and started talking to Jenny a couple months down the road, and I told her what had happened, and she looked at me and she said, "You were right." She said, all of your numbers were spot on. I redid it all, but it was spot on. And you should have seen the look on Nancy's face when I told her that you were correct and that all of the information was correct. I think they gave up on pursuing that contract because they couldn't falsify the numbers. And Jenny basically backed me up, which I was grateful for, but it was too late. I was already gone. The bridge was burned, and I was over it. I was on to a whole new thing, and I was glad to be gone from the bank. Working at a bank, I was kind of over it. And I never worked at another bank again. Um, Not to say that I didn't learn a whole lot, but I did not really connect with any of those people after that. I moved on and redirected my career in another direction and went into commercial origination and a lot of other things. So In the end, it was a blessing in disguise, but I wasn't too happy about how I was blackballed to some extent, and told that um, it was my fault that they lost a pathway to income and a contract, and it wasn't my fault, and I didn't make a mistake, and I was grateful to Jenny for validating that. But that didn't mean I wanted to go back or repeat any of that. So this is a story of when I got fired for doing my job. I don't know if that's ever happened to any of you, but I wasn't too happy at the time. But again, like I said, it was a blessing in disguise. So that's what I have to say about that. In conclusion, and for whatever it's worth, this is my little protest against his story. This is me telling my story my way for the record. It's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I would love to hear your stories as well. So please feel free to share your stories in the comments. Until next time, be well, choose love, and thank you. Thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.